All right, welcome to the Agile Podcast. So today I'm going to hit a product-specific topic, which has to do with product manager topics that are near and dear to Marty Cagan and also are near and dear to me. There are two articles that we'll be dealing with today, the MBA Pathology and the CSPO Pathology within product management. One of the things I had to do when I was a contract product manager at a software startup is I had to hire that startup's first permanent employee product manager. And if you've ever been in the role of the first product manager, the company really is taking a risk because they're not aware a lot of times what goes into that role. So I want to call attention to these two articles. And even though I'm going to be showing them on the screen in this review here, I'm going to put links down below so you can go read the original articles. But let's go ahead and let's start with the CSPO Pathology. Again, written by Marty Cagan. This is June 9th, 2021, right? So it's pretty fresh, pretty new. And let's highlight some things here in the article. So here's his blog, svpg.com. We'll start with the CSPO Pathology, okay? Marty Cagan begins the article by talking about some of the typical things that he sees in weak product teams, what he calls weak product teams, right? You'll see product versus feature teams, you'll see product versus project teams, and you'll see product versus delivery teams. So those all seem very similar to each other. Let's stop there for a second. So those all seem very similar to each other at first glance, but one of the terms that I like to say on a regular basis is a feature factory. Now, that's the development team that basically takes features directly from the business, whoever in the business that might be. It might be executive, might be the sales team, might be whoever. It might be whoever is the highest paid person, whoever screams the loudest. There's a lot of different prioritization methods that development teams use. And you could find yourself being a product team where the business comes to you with problems. So you write in your stories, you write business problems, and the team figures out how to solve them. Or you could be feature teams, whereas you write in the story what feature the business wants, and then you go create that feature. I'm not trying to get into the weeds real early in this video. I'd like to get into the content before I start differentiating between the different types of teams. I think we on this podcast, I think we hit on product teams versus project teams quite enough, where I don't need to go into the distinction between product and project. If you would like a more in-depth distinction of what a product team is versus a project team when it comes to software delivery, I think you probably go to the very last podcast that we did, and I might link that as well to hear more about that. Okay. Product team is going to be dedicated to one individual product, and they're going to be trying to solve goals and business problems that involve that product and then the software of that product, right? Rather than basically doing what they're told. Or I've also called this order taking on other podcasts, and I've also called it other derogatory terms, but I'm going to ignore those for right now. Back to the article. Let's talk about problematic behaviors. I think the main idea in this article that Marty Cagan is trying to point out is people conflating the product owner position, which is the role in an agile delivery team, with one of the product manager, which some people will call the product manager the CEO of the product, the main person in the company that people will go to for questions about the product or to discuss the future of the product. So in some organizations, the product manager might include the role of product owner. In other organizations, especially when you go to a scaled level, the product owner role, once a product becomes large enough or scaled enough or with enough people on the team, I guess scaled, same thing, you may need to separate the role of the product owner, which is the person who represents product day to day and actually sits with the developers. That might need to be separated from the product manager, who's taking a systems approach with the entire product line, who's thinking about far more than just the individual features that are being developed. The product manager maybe has a P&L, profit and loss. They're probably considering financials. They're probably considering all the different types of stakeholders that use the product and how they use the product. They're considering pricing. And the easy way for me to think about this is if you don't deal with financials, you're probably not a product manager. If you're not the person who is in the room when new features and new problems are discussed, and you're hearing about it second or third hand, also you're probably not a product manager. I don't say that to try to be incendiary in any way, shape, or form. I'm trying to align you, the viewer, your expectations with what the author of this article is trying to say, to just try to understand where the author is coming from. Let's go back to the article. The main point he's trying to put in here is the people who are going out and going through a Certified Scrum Product Owner, CSPO course. They are trying to understand how to work with a development team, and that is a small portion of a product manager's job if the product owner and product manager are combined together. So he will say in here that confusing the rituals of delivery process with the skills and responsibilities of a major job in the product team. I'm not sure if he's going to say it in here, but there are two major sides of product. There is the discovery side and there is the delivery side. On the discovery side, you have everything that has to do with creating prototypes, engaging customers, figuring out who your customers are and what they need, and talking to them before you start building, and then building a prototype, showing it to them, and getting validation before you go off into the deep end to engage your development resources to actually start building things that are scalable and maintainable and reliable in production before your development team start putting a lot of engineering effort into their work. Let's hop back to the article. Because the product role is so poorly understood and because the focus on process is such a tempting proxy for many people, they have literally come to believe that this is what a product manager is supposed to be. Oh, and he believes it's getting worse. Many people in the role have never done the job. I agree. I agree with that one. There are product managers out there who have never actually done the product owner role. And then he goes on to note that managers of product managers can't effectively coach and develop their people. Right, I agree with that. If you've not done the job before, it's going to be very difficult to develop people to do a job that you've never done before. Well, it's actually going to be impossible. And to take it a step further, you may be committing some serious, grievous issues with regard to the development of people's careers at that point. The problem in many companies is that so many of these managers have never done the job themselves or ever seen it done well. So they're forced to depend on more of the training that they would otherwise. Right, yep. He says the fix is not that hard. Sending product managers to CSPO course is fine, but is not in any way a substitute for training as a product manager. I definitely agree with the article at that point. I mean, the CSPO training, especially the entry-level one, focuses on a lot of the same stuff that the Certified Scrum Master, the CSM course, focuses on, which is basically what all of the basics are, what Scrum is, and because it's CSPO, so it's Scrum specific, right? We're not really even dealing with Kanban very much, and we're not dealing with things at a leadership level either. Dealing with leadership and the higher levels of the organization outside of one single development team, I would argue is the majority of your job as a product manager as opposed to dealing with the development team. Let's say you're in a small organization with two teams. Maybe you split your time 50-50 between work with the teams and work with the business. Let's go back to just the bare statistics of Scrum. Let's say every team has a 20% overhead of those are your Scrum events, right? So you work with two teams, that's 40% of your time just kind of taken right off the top. That means you have a 60% of your time. In reality, it's not really 60% of your time because there's going to be some kind of additional time as well on top of that. But either way, I think we could probably call it even to say there's a 50-50 split between time that you have with your teams and time that you have free to focus with the business and the customers. That's probably the most load that I would suggest for someone in dual role. Once you go above that, you have to choose one side or another. You're either going to work with the business and business stakeholders, and then you have to find somebody else to kind of run the teams for you. Basically, you'll become the product manager, and you'll have to find a product owner or a PO to take over the teams for you that you work very well with. Or the opposite, you'll have to stay with the teams, and you'll have to find somebody who can work at a leadership level and at the customer level to kind of relieve you of the burden of having to deal with customers at the same time. All right, let's cut back over to the article. Our first choice is always for the manager to coach and develop product managers herself. This assumes she has the experience as strong product managers. I kind of see where he's going here. The majority of people in these places have not worked as a product manager. They've kind of worked as a product owner in disguise, taking inputs from the executives and other VPs or directors or basically leadership members in the organization, and they've not had to craft a vision and direction and figure out a course for themselves. Failing that, there's good options. You send your product managers to actual product management training. Just be sure you do your research and make sure the specific instructor. Yeah, this is an issue with training. You have to make sure that the instructors themselves are the types of instructors that you're looking for. And that does require a bit of effort. Unfortunately, CSPO pathology continues to spread and continues to spawn new variants, some of which are even more deadly to innovation, e.g. SAFE. Yikes. Yeah, shots fired at SAFE. I don't know if I really want to touch that one. I mean, listen, I'm not here to take shots at SAFE. Who am I? If it works for your organization and your organization needs a nice milky film to put over their command and control that looks like Agile, like who am I to argue with that? I'm not arguing that CSPO certification is bad or frequently recommend product managers take that simple course to learn their responsibilities as part of an Agile team. Exactly what I was saying, as part of the Agile team. And I'm certainly not arguing that Agile is bad, even though I've been advocating Agile methods and delivery for nearly 20 years, which should cause leaders to reconsider the influence on your product people and whether they're truly meeting their needs. I think the main idea in that article is the CSPO, Certified Scrum Product Owner Certification, has a lot to do with how to work with development teams and not a lot to do with how to work with the rest of the business. I almost want to say that the technology side of the house versus the business side of the house. If I'm going to draw a line down the middle of them, that's how I draw the line. If you go deeper into the Marty Cagan school of thought and you watch a bunch of other videos and stuff like I have, the business is interested in the discovery side of the house. And on the discovery side of the house, you have figuring out what features are the most valuable to build, what features are the most feasible to build, and what features will be most viable. Tech teams often can do a lot to figure out how to make features more usable, right? Usability. If you're fortunate enough to have UI, UX people in-house, actually in-house with your teams, or available to you, then hopefully you have the usability thing knocked out and set. So very fortunate. Not all teams have UI, UX people, and it's great to have them. Teams also are pretty good at trying to understand if things are feasible, if things are just wildly outlandish ideas. But whether or not things are viable with regard to the market, viable, and whether things are valuable to the customers, especially when you start considering the culture of some businesses where executives come down and say, oh, the customers really need feature X. And you're basically taking the executive's word for it because they're the highest paid person in the room or they're the loudest screaming person in the room. And you're not really allowed to challenge, or challenging would be seen as a negative, seen as a challenge at an organizational leadership level, and certainly recommended against. But the feasibility of implementation and the value of the actual feature being implemented, I would expect that the development teams could have some kind of input into either of those issues. The viability and the value. Viability more than anything else of a solution. Your product manager really has to couple directly with the customers and directly with the other leadership level stakeholders in the organization to develop those. And that is the things we put on the product management level, as opposed to the product owner team level, if we're going to split the two, right? So in the Marty Cagan School of Thought, we put all of those activities I just mentioned under the banner of discovery. These things happen before anything ever reaches the teams, right? Or maybe you might engage one or two higher level team members, or maybe UX is split and shared across teams, or maybe you have some kind of solution architect or technical leader split across teams who kind of engages things at a much higher level. Without talking about specifics, when you engage at the team level, which is the typical product owner level, where product owners are taught in a CSPO class to engage, and where most development team members think about development team members, testers, I would argue about BAs, anybody else that you might find on a development team, the performance of the product, the scalability of the product, especially for developers, the maintainability of a product. Like once we create it for the first time, how difficult will it be to go back in and add or change features? And then, of course, the reliability. I mean, you have entire roles now as site reliability engineers that are built around reliability. So these things are in the Marty Cagan school of thought, all of these categories fall under delivery, which is handled by development teams, product owners, as opposed to product managers. Again, unless they're all rolled together into one role, which I have seen before, there is a distinction. So if anyone ever asks you in an interview, what is the difference between a product manager and a product owner, which is a question that I myself ask in interviews, you will be able to say the product manager may be responsible for both the discovery, which has to do with creating prototypes, quick prototypes and design thinking, figuring out what is valuable to the customer, figuring out what we can actually build, what is viable and what is feasible in the market and to the customer, and using prototypes to quickly figure out usability, UI, UX design. And then once we've figured all that out, the other side of that is the actual software delivery, where we're trying to build solutions that are scalable and reliable and that perform well and that we can easily maintain and build off of in the future. And when we grow to a certain point and we decide we need to split those two roles, the entire delivery function will go over here and we'll sit with the teams, and we can have many delivery functions, meaning scaled, under one product manager who's doing discovery, who's leveraging his team members who are product owners, who have teams of their own, to carry out the actual delivery of software. And that is the CSPO Pathology blog article. I don't know what to call it. The CSPO Pathology, well, I think that was the first one written. The other one that was written was the MBA Pathology, which is a bit more complicated, and let's look at that one too. This is the second article, written June 14th, as opposed to June 9th. So written June 14th, a couple days later. In this article, he says that in case you're thinking that the well-known problems of MBA programs have been true 10 and 20 years ago, they can't possibly be true today. He says that evidence that he collected for this article was very recent, right? So he says that this is as current as ever. It's no secret that many strong leaders in Silicon Valley are absolutely allergic to MBAs. And you have a nice quote here from Elon Musk. As much as possible, avoid hiring MBAs. MBA programs don't teach people how to create companies. Our position is that we hire someone in spite of an MBA, not because of one. So he throws in a slightly incendiary comment to get everyone thinking and engaged and potentially outraged and reading further. I approve of this business model. Okay, so Silicon Valley is not the rest of the country or the world. So I'm willing to discount some incendiary tweets right here in order to keep reading. So he says, many of the students accepted into top MBA programs often have the right raw materials to be coached and developed into exceptionally strong product managers. Okay, so he's kind of skirting both sides of the fence, but he also says there is some critically important coaching and unlearning that needs to be done. I think I see where he's going with this one. He kind of spells it out here, which is MBA grads, they learn some things that are kind of outdated or irrelevant or just counterproductive, and if you're willing to help them unlearn those things or turn around some of the deficiencies in their education, then they could be really good assets to your company. He gives a sentence here that I'm going to highlight because I think it's kind of the crux of the entire article. The problems have been long attributed to the fact that MBA programs were originally designed to teach industrial-style command and control management thinking. Today's MBA programs are not all bad. MBA programs were originally designed to teach industrial-style command and control management thinking, equating management with leadership. Management style learn command and control is usually exactly wrong for tech-powered companies. One of the things he points out here, which comes up often on the podcast, is that MBA programs are designed to teach command and control style management thinking. And the article will go on to talk about how command and control does not work in tech industries. I think what he's trying to point out here, which isn't said exactly the way that we've kind of fell into describing it on the podcast here, which is industrial age thinking cannot be applied to digital age projects. Industrial age techniques cannot be applied to digital age product management. It just doesn't work. We're not cogs in a machine, and there is not one single way to produce software, produce code that is better than everything else. That style of management simply does not work in the digital age. It's been outdated, basically. He kind of stopped short of going out, and I'm not sure if it's on purpose or if it's just his natural diplomatic way of speaking. But let's dig a little more. Putting aside the fact that management styles learned is usually exactly wrong for tech-powered companies, there's a deeply rooted conflation of management with leadership. Believe that managers are inherently supposed to be viewed as leaders, or more generally believing that they are supposed to act like the boss. In fairness, it's hard to blame someone who just paid a boatload of money and dedicated 2 years of their life for a degree in business management, thinking that their birthright is to step into the role of the boss. Yeah, of course. Again, this is why we talk about Taylorism so much on the podcast, because, again, once you've paid for that learning, there is a certain amount of entitlement that you feel that you are now in the management class, which goes directly back to Taylorism and the roots of command and control. Because you have an MBA, it does not entitle you to be in a different class. The system of classism, where there is a labor class and a management class, went out with the 1800s. Or potentially before that. I really should do some research. Maybe that'll be a topic for a future podcast. He points out a product manager is not actually the boss. They don't really supervise anyone. I mean, maybe eventually you'll get to a point where your responsibilities divide, like I was talking about before with the discovery piece and the delivery piece, where you'll end up supervising product owners in your segment of the product. Maybe you'll end up growing to a point where you need to bring in product owners to relieve you of the delivery piece to allow you to continue focusing on the discovery piece. But that is not an immediate thing. That is something that will happen over time as success takes place and the product grows and the company grows. And he even points out here, as a product manager, you're an individual contributor. The true peers are your designers and engineers. You need to earn your spot as part of the team, and typically requires skills that you didn't learn in business school. The belief in predictability, the religion of business cases, blind faith of business analytics, and more, pressure to have the answer. Right? These are all things that he's pointing out that MBA graduates kind of suffer from, that they are expected to know the answer, to have the answer. And when they don't, it could kind of crack them, stress them out or push them past their limits or push them to make bad decisions maybe. If you're entering the field of knowledge work, then you need to rely on the team members that are around you, whether those team members are architects or designers or your product owners or your development team. Again, in the case where you're doing both product manager and the product owner role, you rely on the other people around you to help you through the discovery phase to figure out the value in ideas and the viability in ideas. You can't do it all by yourself. And saying that I don't know, saying the words I don't know, yeah, that could be scary for some people, especially when they feel the expectation that they should have all the answers, because you're in the spot where people are going to come to you for answers. Saying I don't know should not necessarily be perceived as a bad thing. I feel the culture of the company probably could lend itself to this, as well as the culture of the country that you're living in as well. Maybe it's not perceived as good to say I don't know. I've worked on a lot of teams with project managers where if you say I don't know, that's considered a mark of failure from a project manager. I can't believe you don't know. Why would you say you don't know? It's your job to know. You're on the team. I've been through a lot of discussions like that. All right. The most serious and deep-rooted problem is thinking of technology as a cost center rather than a core enabler of the business. How many ways, both explicit and implicit, the typical MBA program is a message sent that the manager is the one responsible for the decisions, and we simply hire engineers and designers to do their bidding. We talked about this a bit on the last podcast as well with offshoring. this command and control leadership and this category here with the role of technology, where your team is, well, not even your team, all of the teams that can contribute to a program are seen as a cost center. Basically, they're not seen as bringing revenue into the company. They're seen as a sink for money, right? They just take money. Anytime I see something like that, I would challenge it, because that is an effect of your budget being set up incorrectly for the way that Agile teams deliver, right? All of the revenue that your product should deliver should be seen as a function of that team or teams. And if you're doing projects and you have teams that are stood up temporarily, it's going to be very difficult to equate the team's cost to the amount of money that the product brings in each month. So I could see it getting watered down to the point where nobody really understands. The P&L of the product should be considering all the money that product is bringing in. I probably could do an entire video just on financials, but for the purposes of this topic, let's make a hard left and go around this particular roadblock for right now. He says, yet the best tech-powered companies know that empowered teams are where innovation comes from, not from top-down business strategy sessions. And then he says, Reed Hastings and Netflix emphasizes lead with context, not control. Right. Obviously, you want to push decisions onto your teams. You want to have distributed decision-making, and that's kind of where he's going here. It's very difficult to coach, especially for people who are in top-down types of organizations, especially financial institutions or institutions that have implemented top-down style frameworks, for example, SAFe. To be clear, I'm not suggesting leaders shouldn't lead. I've come to believe that these problems are baked into MBA programs. For a company that believes it needs to transform, there's issues they need to unlearn at the key senior leadership team. And of course, every Agile coach knows that to be true, right? You have to change your leaders and the way that they manage. I will say, air quotes, lead, manage. Kind of using the same term in order to really be effective. And I think he starts to make his summary down here and near the bottom. Many companies, especially larger and older companies that don't yet understand the role of technology, you often have literally hundreds of stakeholders and executives that were educated in the MBA Pathology, in particular the dependence on command and control style leadership with the illusion of predictability. And they meet an eager market of Agile coaches that tell them exactly what they want to hear. They can have the top-down command and control they love and still check the Agile box. All they need to do is adopt the right process, and he goes on to kind of slam safe here. Yeah, certainly, there's a lot of people making money off of different certifications, especially people up there at the Fortune 100. Sure, absolutely. I feel that the article doesn't even need that to have as much impact. The point he's trying to make here is there are some innate beliefs that come with the MBA education, which is a heavy emphasis on command and control, and some biases that come along with command and control. The main issue is your overlearning of the command and control style management and how that's really going to hold you back. And you need to get over and around those biases in order to be effective in both discovery and delivery when you get into the field of product management. If not in the delivery phase, because I've personally witnessed a lot of people who can deliver software who are what I would describe as taskmasters to development teams, but can drive software that's scalable, that performs well, that's maintainable, can drive good software in a command and control style, even though they burn their teams out while doing so. But have a very difficult time at the discovery level, really crafting their own vision and moving forward their own goals rather than basically just taking orders from other executives throughout the organization, right? It's going to be very difficult to be able to do that without the ability to collaborate with your team members. So both these articles are pretty valuable to me in addition to the rest of the work and the blogs and the articles that you can read about Marty Cagan. He's a very visible figure in the product space. And he generally he won't steer you wrong. But again, his point in both of these, in the CSPO Pathology, is that the discovery and delivery are two separate functions of a product manager. Kind of don't get trapped in just delivery. And then with the MBA Pathology, command and control really doesn't work for knowledge work and product work. at least at a discovery level, certainly doesn't work for creative and knowledge type work. There may be some unlearning of bad habits that go into that. In the case where this is new to you, you haven't heard these aspects of product management before, go ahead and let me know down in the comments. What did you learn? What was the most interesting out of here? Either way, consider giving this video a like, please. Every like counts because we're a small channel. And if you live in the Tampa area and would like to be a guest on the Agile Podcast, go ahead and shoot us an email at agilepodcastquestions@gmail.com.